we are doing a small presentation on the new Vivid Audio Moya M1, hosted by Mr. Laurence Dickie and Mrs. Gracia Bacco. My name's Elf Kek, I'm the sales director for Vivid Audio, and we hope you have a lovely time here. 2 months ago we launched this project with quite some success in China, but now it's the first time that it's really out here. But walking around on that premiere place, this is what we heard all the time. Please welcome Laurence Dickie, Gracia Bacco.
Thank you. So, people have just come up to me and said, why? We made a perfectly good top-of-the-range loudspeaker, the G1S, the Gear Spirit. What could a larger loudspeaker possibly bring? Well, just in a blunt way, it brings more sheer sound level capability. Of course, it's a bigger loudspeaker. But the thing I hope that you'll discover today is that the size brings an effortlessness. The scale of the performance, even at low levels, is larger and easier than even the G1S. Ewout's going to play another track now, which I hope will open a window onto that sort of dimension that Moya will bring. And then later we'll talk a little bit about the detail of why we do what we do. Most obvious question that people ask is, why 8 bass drivers? Is it a magic number? Well, not in particularly, although I think there are some religions that might have ascribed special spiritual values to the number 8. But for me, it was really an engineering decision. The lower end of a driver's frequency range is determined by its excursion capability and the sound level that it will produce for that excursion. So if we start with the D50, which can move about 1 millimetre, and say, right, we want to create 120 dB maximum level. Well, with 1 millimetre of travel, to achieve 120 dB, you can only go down to about 1.7 kilohertz. And by the same logic, when we get to the bottom of this driver, which can move 2 millimetres, we find that we can produce 120 dB. And let's not forget, 120 dB is quite loud. We can get down to about 550 hertz. Similarly, a travel of 4 millimetres gets you down to about 130 hertz. Now, with the C225, which can move 12.5 millimetres, and its peak excursion is at 30 hertz, how many bass drivers do we need to make 120 dB to keep up with the rest of the system? And the answer is 8. So it's completely rational. I know some people think it was quite whimsical, and indeed there was a sort of whimsical feel about it in the early days, but it is an actual engineering decision that we should use these 8. Now, I think the next track happens by chance to have a stonking bass note at around about 30 hertz, which is where these drivers are moving at their maximum, but you'll experience quite a reasonable level of LF, while the drivers are in fact still a long way from their peak excursion, and therefore are really having an easy time, and they will deliver that low frequency with an ease and a lack of distortion. Take it away.
Finally get paid for the get down. You can't tell me shit now about time. Do you know how many lines I done put down? Vibes I done sent down. But we in here, you dig. I love the market till they come red carpeting kids. Success still the target, soon I'll be crossing that bridge. But can't bring everybody with me, family only. I got some people think I owe a favor, barely know me. That's why my focus on...
I got
Well-
slimmer.
Eh?
I got slimmer.
Oh yeah, we've got a new GJ. Yeah. So actually, that 30 hertz note, which I know is really prominent towards the back of the room, it's obviously at the other end not so much, but I hope you could experience that. Now, I'm just going to do a quick resume of those fundamental technologies which have really defined Vivid Audio for the 20 odd years that we've been in existence. Some of which were inherited from my previous work, of course. The first aspect which all our loudspeakers have, and which is most visually obvious, is this smooth external shape. It's there for a reason. The point is that sharp edges cause diffraction, and diffraction causes interference, which means basically irregularities in the frequency response, which nobody wants. We're very sensitive to the effects of resonances and reflections. I've always banged on about this. I think it's a matter of having evolved for eons to detect danger through hearing, and it means that we're extremely sensitive to the qualities of resonance and reflection. So the smooth external shape is one really obvious factor, but perhaps the most important factor in, for me in loudspeaker design is of course the diaphragm itself, because all the sound comes from the diaphragm. Now, Gracie will go into some detail about how we do use computers to optimize the shape of our diaphragms, but one particular example, which actually dates right back to the beginning of Vivid Audio, is the shape that we chose for these two dome drivers. We let a computer optimizer mash through the figures, and it came up with an optimum. And I remember when I first set eyes on this curve, and if I just stop this thing, and I saw this curve, and I just thought, it's a catenary. It's just so characteristic, and it's the shape that's formed when you hang a chain. Catenary, the name derived from Latin, I believe. It's unusual that the optimum for a static form and a dynamic form are the same, but so it is. A static dome used in the Astrodome or in various cathedrals around the world also happens to be the optimum for a dome loudspeaker. The important thing is that we have a peripheral carbon fibre stiffener, which is what makes the catenary the optimum for this driver. Gracia will talk a little more about the optimization of other shapes later. The next most important thing is what happens to the sound from the back of the diaphragm. It's obvious that the sound from the front of the diaphragm, that's what we hear, but the sound from the back of the diaphragm, which is equal but opposite to that from the front, needs to be disposed of nicely. If the sound from the back of the diaphragm goes into a resonant chamber, it will come back out through the diaphragm and you will hear it. So it's important to absorb that sound. This is a little invention I came up with, again, as I say, before Vivid. You might have seen a snail attached to things like this about 30 years ago. Gosh, 40 years ago. But I'm going to do this little demonstration which will show you the effectiveness of this simple little device. If I talk into this tube, I hope you can hear the resonant quality that it's adopted. And if I put my hand over there, and you'll hear it's still pretty resonant, so blocking the end doesn't really sort anything out. But if I put an exponential absorber in, the resonances go away completely. This little device is on the back of all our drivers. In these low mids, actually, the absorber tube goes up the sides, but it's there. In all these drivers, we have an exponential absorber. Very simple, but very, very effective. Our first product, the B1, was acoustically just a bass reflex. When we came out with gear, we developed a reflex and exponential absorber combination, which still, to this day, we use in the Moya. The absorber is now at the back, whereas, of course, in the gear, it was this very ostentatious and visible spiral thing on the top. Let me just show you the absorber in operation. Now, this little sphere mimics the air in a loudspeaker, a bass reflex loudspeaker, and the hole at the top mimics the port. And if I blow down, the top you can hear the bass note, but you can also hear those high frequencies. If I overblow it, you can actually excite those harmonics. And those are caused by sounds bouncing around on the inside. If I stick this same exponential absorber on the end, now you just have the fundamental note, and if I blow hard, you hear that those individual tones are no longer there. You just get the swept tone as the vortex shedding gets more rapid. These fundamental technologies have been carried through all our loudspeakers, and I hope you'll agree by the end of today that we're displaying them here really at the pinnacle of what we can do with those things. Right, I think it's time to have some more tunes. With this airy, lofty acoustic, which really is brought out so well with particularly this cluster of mid and high frequency drivers. I started a lot of the engineering concepts which have gone into these products on a bit of a wet finger approach. Sometimes I've backed it up later with science, but I must admit I've been quite intuitive at times in the development and design of speakers and developing ideas. But as time's gone on, it's become quite obvious that we need to actually have a bit of rigour. And we relatively recently took on Grecia Bacco here. She's the head of our numerical studies department, and Grecia uses computers to actually lend weight to what I formerly would have worked out by being on a wing and a prayer. So Grecia will now talk technical. Don't baffle them.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us for this Moya launch. And indeed, I try to bring to computer life all of his crazy ideas. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I do finite element modeling and optimization, and I'm here to build up on what Laurence has said and delve more into the excellence behind Moya and indeed all of our Vivid speakers. People often ask us how we voice our loudspeakers, and in truth, we just don't. So at Vivid, we believe that pistonic movement of the drivers is the only way to deliver uncolored sound, just like the artist intended. And we do this in many different ways. As Laurence has explained, we use catenary domes, but we also consider materials. So for example, Moya features diamond-like coating together with our traditional aluminum cones and domes. And yeah, I would like to play you a track that really brings to life the purity of the mid-range and also really shows how we have the drivers operate well below breakup frequency, and so with unmatched pureness. Please. Well, our drivers, as we said, operate well below the first breakup mode, but the first breakup mode is not the only thing that determines the highest frequency at which a driver should operate. And in fact, even our perfectly pistonic drivers start to beam at higher frequencies. So you have a narrowing of the auditory scene, but we don't want that. We want a wide, natural auditory scene. So in crossover design and optimization is in fact fundamental for this. So at higher frequencies, as we said, we want a wide auditory scene, but at lower frequencies, what's really fundamental is how many dBs you want to produce at that frequency. So I'd like to play now you a track which really shows how airy, how wide the song sounds, even with speakers that are not as huge as people thought, like Moya.
Hoy pienso en qué pasó y cómo me afectó las horas que pasé en aquel bus. No entiendo bien por qué mi abuelo distraído se bajó sin mí. Yo seguí.
All right, so far we've talked about how the air gets moved by cones and domes so that the sound is pure. But we mustn't forget that the true heart of a loudspeaker is its motor, so the magnets. And indeed, magnet design is what makes or breaks a loudspeaker. And regarding low-frequency magnets, what we really want is the longest possible linear coil travel. And that's why at Vivid we use long magnets and short coils so that the efficiency is maximized and the flux is where it matters in the gap. So we'd like to play a bassy track and really show that linear travel of our bass drivers.
Yeah, hold on.
Or maybe not.
Yes, we are.
Okay,
Maybe I should-
hang on, tell them something about the high frequency magnets as well while he's finding the track. Is that
Okay.
right?
No, I'm there now.
Okay.
Oh.
So I've spoken about low-frequency magnets. In high-frequency magnets, what we really want is the maximum flux possible in the gap, since the coil almost doesn't move at all. You know, it moves very little. What I do at Vivid Audio is try to optimize, find new materials, new designs that will deliver the best result possible. And indeed, thanks to FEM simulations, we found that the combination of hyperco and steel takes us from 2.4 Tesla to 2.5 Tesla, and a 0.1 Tesla is quite a bit of increase. So this is the point where I say we
the
should
hell's
play
happening
a track with very articulate high frequencies. I'm not sure we're gonna do that.
Follow remix.
It's okay. Let them sort it out. You don't have to.
Okay.
But still, there's nothing. Choose
Shall we move straight on to
the last track.
Yeah.
Was it Frank Zappa?
Yeah.
First
that's
Frank
it.
Zappa.
Right.
Waar is je CD blijven? Ja, het is.
As a teenager, Frank Zappa was one of my main influences, and it's taken this long to actually play a bit of Frank to demonstrate how speakers I'm chuffed a bit. Thank you so much, Gracia. I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard today. As you will understand, I'm very definitely an engineer, and we approach loudspeaker design from an engineering perspective. We like to understand everything we're doing, and we believe that you can only build when you have that foundation of understanding. But we never forget that in the end we are a window onto the work of artists, and that's the most important thing. You know, we are just a means to an end. So enjoy the music. One more, please. Thank you.